All right, my name is Jacob Stickle. Today's date is December 13th, and we're here for the oral history today, and we're here with
Tori Otten, Assistant Archivist.
And
Jane Conn.
Thank you for coming. Alrighty, so when and where were you born?
I was born in Erie, Pennsylvania.
All right.
I don't have to give the year, do I?
You do not.
Oh, no.
All right, and did you grow up in Erie, Pennsylvania? Or?
I actually did not. My father and his family were from Erie, Pennsylvania, but I did grow up in Pennsylvania. I also lived in Oklahoma, New York, and Kentucky.
Oh, all over the place.
So, yeah, very transient.
Man.
At what time did you come to Ohio then?
Ohio. I came to Ohio back in 1987.
Well, glad you're here.
Thank you.
So, prior to your work with Warren County and other large entities, what jobs did you have before government work?
Sure. My work experience and resume are pretty eclectic. My major in college was English, education, psychology, kind of a weird conglomeration of study. But I actually worked for several financial institutions. I was with Fidelity Investments for a while in their security service and sales divisions, which was neat. I was a business owner. Once I started having children, I chose to be home with them and not be employed. However, I did a lot of volunteer work, a lot that was demanding. I think the highlight of that work was being on staff with MOPS International, called Mothers of Preschoolers, and being able to develop and run what are still many groups in this area that are still going strong.
Wonderful. So, after all of that amazing work, obviously if you're here, you worked with the government. So at what point did you start working for Warren County?
I started working for the Warren County Prosecutors back in 2003.
Okay, and going on into so what was your official job title when you started working for the prosecutor's office?
Actually, when I started, Rachel Hetzel had been appointed prosecutor, and we still had to go through the election process. Rachel happened to be a friend of mine, and she asked me if I would come and work for her part-time. Part-time seemed inviting. Wasn't really looking for more than that with some other things I had going on. And so I came and served as a victim's advocate in the Lebanon Municipal Court on a part-time basis. So that's what I started at.
And how long did you stay there?
Well, I was with the prosecutor's office for 8 years, 2003 through 2011. Just honestly, I don't know if it was more than 4 months in, Rachel asked me if I would please consider going full-time and becoming the director of the division. At that time, there was a need for more leadership in that service area. And I think Rachel believed in me and felt that that was something that I could take on. I was challenged by the thought, but I really was giving pushback about working full-time. Still had a son in high school, daughter in college, and some other responsibilities that I found the balance to be very satisfying, and the thought of full-time work seemed a little exhausting. But if you knew Rachel Hetzel, she was not an easy person to say no to, and she won, and I went full-time and did become the director of the Victim Advocate Services Division for the Warren County Prosecutor's Office, and that would have been in 2004.
All right. Where was the prosecutor's office located at the time?
Same building, 500 Justice Drive, however, not same building, not the same location. Of course, big building project. They now have this beautiful facility. It's radically changed, but at that time, I believe there's some magistrates back in the civil division is back where the prosecutor's office used to be. Across from some of the courtrooms. But that used to be the entire prosecutor's office, and down a little ways, which I'm not even sure what they use the rooms for now, is the victim advocate division. And then across from that, we were all segregated a little bit. Civil was in this building, the administrative building, and then some of the assistant prosecutors were down a hall in another wing. So I have no doubt David Fornshell is so thrilled to have all of his staff together in such a beautiful space.
Oh yeah.
Much easier.
Absolutely lovely there now. So acting as director, what did a standard day look like for you?
You know what? That is a really good question, but an absolutely impossible one to answer because it was one of the things I loved about my work there. There was no standard date. We had a standard rhythm, which would be, indictments and taking things before the grand jury and finding out what cases were going to be prosecuted at the felony level. We provided services to Mason, Franklin, and Lebanon municipal courts, and in addition to that, county court. So we were spread out, but of course the lower courts are misdemeanor charges, and that's quite honestly where a lot of although the prosecutor's office victim advocate division provided advocacy to all victims of crime, the ones that seemed to need a little more assistance and guidance and referrals were domestic violence or sexual assault oriented cases. And more often than not, those oftentimes will start in the lower court and then elevate if there's continuing to be charges, then they'll elevate to the felony level. But in terms of just really sitting and needing to support a victim, I would say the majority of those had to do with intimate partner violence or domestic violence and sexual assault.
What does it look like to support a victim? What kind of things would you do for victims?
I love that question. So the overarching role of a victim advocate through the criminal justice system is to let them know that they have a judicial right, a legal right to receive advocacy through the courts, that they have a voice that needs to be heard, that they do have certain rights to be notified and to be present. And so we educate them on that. So that's a huge one. If you're foreign to the judicial process system, which quite honestly, hopefully most people are. We don't want people to be too familiar with that. That it's very intimidating, it's very scary, people feel lost, and impact that with trauma. And you're just kind of lost in the wilderness a little bit. So having a victim's advocate to be able to say, I'm here with you, you're not walking through this alone, I'm going to explain the judicial process, you're going to know what certain terms mean, I'm going to interpret those for you. We in no way ever acted as legal advisors because victim advocates are not attorneys, but we certainly served as a wonderful conduit in between the prosecutor and the victims.
And how many individuals could you be helping at one time? I know it could be a lot.
Yes. So actually in the lower courts, at times it felt like cattle herding a little bit. You usually I don't know if the system has changed much since I was in that role quite a few years ago now, but it's usually not till the day of that you get the daily docket, and you right away are looking for the crimes that would have a victim present. There are opportunities sometimes to pull those police reports, get the victim's name, give them a call ahead of time and say, are you going to be present for this hearing? I'm going to be there. I'd like to meet you, and maybe create a meeting place within the courtroom so that you can talk to them. Is very helpful and comforting to the victims. The other part of that is they don't know, do I have to come to this? Do I not have to be at this? Obviously, it's usually helpful for victims to be present because all of the attorneys and the judges want to know, are they going to be here as a witness? Are they going to support these allegations? So the other part of advocacy is keeping them on board. Encouraging them to have a voice and to bring justice to the wrong that was done to them.
Yeah. Well, as you've said, your goal is for people not to understand the justice system too much for fear of them getting too wrapped up in the legal system. But what would you view as something that most people don't know about your job and your position?
In terms of victim advocacy
Yes.
in the prosecutor's office, there's a couple things. One is you're dealing with people more times than not that have some form of trauma. There are victims who have never stepped foot into the legal system, and all of a sudden, one case that I can remember was a home invasion. It was a big deal. It was out by the prison. They were held at gunpoint, tied up for a long time. It was very, very traumatic. These two women one was an educator, a teacher. I'm trying to remember the role of the other, but think about going to work, your daily regime, routines, what we view would be as normal, and all of a sudden you're held captive in your home by gunpoint by an escaped prisoner. Their world radically changed on a dime. And I think the hardest thing as an advocate, from my perspective, was trying to discern what that person needed at that time. Some people like hugs, some people don't.
Yeah.
Some people just want to be heard and not get a lot of information dumped on them. Other people want all the information. Just tell it all to me. Some people just want it sprinkled and give it to me when I need to know it. You have to really read, and a lot of psychology kind of comes into it, and sensitivity, because for example, one of the privileges that a victim's given is at time of sentencing, they can give what's called a victim's impact statement. Mm-hmm. And some choose not to do that. I never, ever forced that upon anyone. I would let them know how it could be a healing advantage for them, and that I would stand there with them if they wanted me to or not. But I worked with a prosecutor who felt that, she's like, why don't you put your arm around these people? And I said, because if I was standing up there, I would not want somebody's arm around me. I would be so uncomfortable with that. It would almost feel a little patronizing to me. And that gave her a whole different perspective. So really understanding who you're working with and how can you best serve them. Not what are your practices and you like to do as an advocate, but really what is it that they need and what tools do you have that you can share with them?
Well, as you talked about psychology in those moments, do you think that your time in college really helped prepare you for that when you focused some on psychology?
Who knows? who knows? You know, I happen to, no doubt, I think whatever we learn somehow filters in and through our intelligence and our experiences. So yes, I don't think anything we learn is usually in vain. I did have the privilege of growing up in a home that was very, very service-oriented. My dad was a full-time pastor, minister. I saw my parents serve our communities in amazing ways, and a lot of people in and out of our homes that even lived with us short periods of time and so forth. And also prior to coming to the prosecutor's office, I worked in the nonprofit arena, doing several different missions. One was working with women with unexpected pregnancies and guiding them through a very difficult time in their life. The other was working with moms with young children. Another one was working with an education program within, at that time I lived in Mason, and we launched a program for Mason High School. And then took it out to some other school districts. But I think when you're in the nonprofit or service-oriented world, you kind of lean in toward having a different level of empathy and understanding when you're working with people. Yeah. But I will give a little check of credit to my my psychology professors.
Well, we appreciate everything that they taught you. When it came to the public, how often would you actually have to interact with them? Is there behind the scenes work where you're not talking directly to the victims?
Yes, so again, during my time there, the victim advocates worked very, very closely with the prosecutor, assistant prosecutors that were assigned on the case. Again, in municipal court, it's so fast-paced. You may only see that victim one time. And never work with them again. And it's not as relational. In felony court, I had cases sometimes that would last a couple years. So you build quite a relationship with the victims and their families. One that comes to mind for me personally was the Ryan Widmer case. Not to create any controversy, but that case had 3 trials, and that started off with the victim's family really kind of supporting Ryan Widmer, the defendant, at that time. It didn't take him long to begin to see some signs that made them question his innocence. And then they radically took a stand that they felt he was guilty of those charges, and were very beyond cooperative with the prosecutor's office. But I worked with that family for a long time. Brother and Sarah's brother and sister-in-law would come in from out of town. I would often, at times, we would go to dinner, different things to make their time here a little easier. If there was a lunch break, we would just all go to lunch together. And they became, we agreed that there were always hugs and goodbyes and correspondence in between. Not just one trial, but 2, and then a 3rd trial. So you do definitely at the felony level, the victim advocates oftentimes will build quite a relationship and rapport with not just the direct victims. In that case, the direct victim was deceased, she was murdered, but the indirect victims, such as family members, and the impact it has on families and friends, and oftentimes even a full community. One of those examples would be the Viet case. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but a Canadian family who lived in Mason, and 4 children. He was traveling. I won't get into the details of that case, but basically she found out he was having an affair, and he murdered her. And then he set his house on fire. His intent was to jump out the window. And his intent, I believe, was to, let me rewind, to just now burn up the entire family. Children were sound asleep in their beds. And this is my term, it's not a legal term, but wimped out and jumped out the window. And of course, then he ended up committing suicide, but in the Warren County Jail. That case had tremendous impact on our community. That home, I had to take relatives through that home. And that's one that has never left me. I pass that house every time I go to my daughter's home, who's in a connecting neighborhood, and always look down there, see that house, and remember. And I'm still triggered this many years later, not in a really unhealthy way, but I'll always remember pulling up to that house and seeing the kids' toys out in the yard, going in and seeing a melted birthday cake and presents. It was one of the kids' birthdays. They were gonna celebrate the next day. And the smell of that home burning, and then that one stretched some of my advocacy services, in that I had to go down to the Hamilton County Coroner's Office and help the family identify some of the bodies. So it was very challenging, and one that stuck with me for, quite honestly, to this day.
Do you know about when that was?
You know, I'm gonna say maybe back in 2007 range. I apologize. It kind of all becomes a little bit of a blur, but 05, 07, probably closer to the 07 range. And then I know we're going to talk about another role I've had in serving the community, but that was a domestic violence case, and that family is honored every year at the Domestic Violence Memorial Service.
Yeah, I think that the fact that you do remember after this period of time just shows the dedication the victim advocacy group goes to help protect witnesses at this point. So I think that's an amazing addition to this.
Definitely. And my goodness, after working with everybody, going to coroner's office, dinners, meeting with these victims, what do you find to be rewarding in dealing with your line of work?
As a victim's advocate, I think the most rewarding part was knowing that I provided, or other victim advocates have the ability to provide, fill a gap within our judicial process, and provide emotional and mental, intellectual support that otherwise they would be, quite honestly, re-victimized throughout the process without somebody really there advocating for them, making sure that their judicial rights are being adhered to within our legal system. And there were even times where I had the privilege of talking in chambers with a judge or having opportunity to be in there. The longer you serve in that area, the more the judges gain a level of respect and confidence and trust in you. So I never took that lightly, but toward the end, that said, well, just let's bring Jane in. I want to hear from her directly. And quite an honor. I will say that serving as a victim advocate in Warren County was an extremely high privilege. I don't have a work experience to compare it to, but I did get very involved in things at the state level and working with collaboratives statewide through the Attorney General's office and the Office of Victim Witness Advocates, and there's other platforms out there that I chose to get involved in and understand advocacy from a state level and even a national level. I had the privilege of attending several NOVA conferences and presenting at those. So I got to meet advocates from all over the country. And we would often hear stories about law enforcement and mostly judges or public defenders, etc., who appear to lack knowledge in areas of sensitivity and understanding victims of crime and what to do with them. Maybe for some it's just a sense of awkwardness, so it comes across as insensitive. And I always felt so privileged coming back to Warren County, where I felt our judges cared. Most judges will have a bent toward an area of offenses where their strengths shine, and maybe even have a little bit of a prejudice toward those for different reasons. That's just kind of how we're wired. But there were particular judges you always kind of hoped and prayed that certain cases would go before, because you felt that they honored, they're doing their judicial duties, but you also felt that they understood this crime and didn't really, from a sensitivity aspect and with some empathy, and didn't carry into it some negative prejudices.
Absolutely.
Speaking on, you mentioned that there were some insensitivities with certain members of other judges or other employees. Were there any other additional challenges dealing with people in the court or different victims, or what were the challenges that you had?
Probably a challenge would be, and it often leans with domestic violence or sexual assault cases, where it's grueling. I often said, especially with sexual assault cases, back then my daughter was younger, and I thought, wow, I pray she's never victimized, but if she ever happened to be, I often questioned whether or not I would want her to go through the judicial process. It's grueling. You are, no matter how sensitive and supportive we can be through the prosecution side, or even within the courtroom itself with our judges and their staff, you're re-victimized. There's no way around that, because you're going to face the defendant and you're going to face the attorney who's representing that person, and they're going to cross-examine you. And they're going to turn the table and make it do everything within their power. Usually the defense is to make it be your fault, or you wanted that and it wasn't really rape, was it? And it really can be a very difficult, grueling process. The other thing is then if it goes to full trial, then you've got a group of jurors who have to be convinced, and without a shadow of a doubt. And I think the hardest thing I ever had to do as a victim's advocate was to stand in the courtroom with the victim and hear a not guilty verdict. And maintain my composure so I could be strong for them, because I really wanted to cry right alongside of them. The other greatest challenge that I faced was I didn't do a lot of cases in juvenile court, but working in the juvenile court system and seeing young boys and young girls in jumpsuits and shackles. And these were the ones being charged, but understanding that in their short tenure of life, there's a story here. And I don't believe we're born with the intent of evilness, maybe some mental health issues or different things like that, but we're not born with buckets of anger and evil. And that comes oftentimes from being a victim yourself. And I found being within that juvenile court system an enormous challenge for me to process.
In the regard to talking about juvenile, you said that you got to work with all these different groups. Is there a particular victim advocate designated to a certain court system, or did everybody at the time frame just mix cases when they came available?
Now, we assigned.
Okay.
That was the process then. I think it's still that way. But advocates would be assigned to municipal courts.
Okay.
And so one advocate, and that helped for consistency and so forth. And you build a relationship with that court staff. And then you're given some freedoms there in terms of pulling information and getting what you need and floating in and out of the courtroom. So there's a huge advantage to that. So advocates were assigned to one of the municipal courts or to county court. And then again, we would divide up some of the felony cases, but that would obviously go to a senior advocate, somebody who had a lot of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense.
Were there any particular coworkers or managers or people you've worked with that had a significant impact on you?
I would say Rachel Hutzel had a significant impact on me. I learned so much from her. I watched her fight for a role that she was more than adequate to serve in as a female. Still sometimes that challenge for women, I see that getting easier and easier, but she was tough, but she was also very tender, and it was that combination of tough and tenderness of Rachel and her, at least with me, her transparency, that I gained utmost respect for her. I actually left when Rachel left. I just kind of had reached a peak. I have a lot of respect for David Fordjohn. He's done a tremendous job, but I just thought it was time for me to maybe start exploring some other options. And so, of course, Rachel, I worked with her on her campaign and helping her, as many did, become a judge in the 12th District Court of Appeals. What an honor. Got to be there for that swearing in and so forth. And then we remained friends until she very sadly departed from this earth. she's someone I think of every day, but who definitely influenced my life. The other side of that is that she saw something in me. I didn't have victim advocate experience. I think I had experiences that allowed me to become a good victims advocate, but she saw some leadership roles and so forth in me way back that she believed in me, and built a lot of confidence in me that carried me into other things I've been able to do throughout the years.
Absolutely. When it came to the overall experience of being victim advocate director, what memorable events stick out to you? I'd like to, I've talked about a couple heavy cases, so I would say probably the most gratifying was knowing that through my leadership I was able to build some structure. We were able to build in processes to be more effective advocates. We worked on our advocacy credentials. That's through the Ohio Advocate Network. And so I was able to create structure around training and getting funds wrote some grants, worked on getting funds to support travel and training for the advocates. So I believe a lot of the structure that's there today is been sustained through what I was able to build as a team and leave. Yes, absolutely. You can still see the impact that you left today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Looping back around, between the prosecutor's office and your executive directorship on Safe on Main, what were you doing at that point? I'm sorry, that's the elevator.
That is funny. I'm like, is water going to rush through the ceiling?
It is not. Our elevator is very intense.
It sounds like water rushing through a pipe. So good. I can live with the elevator. I was going to pull out an umbrella otherwise. So I did leave the prosecutor's office and actually had a really fun short period experience working for a company based in Chicago called Aftermath. And it was really a very large, successful restoration company. They, through some connections of mine and theirs, wanted to build what I ended up terming a victim advocate vertical. So they contracted with me, and I traveled back and forth, worked with their staff, and built victim sensitivity. I built toolkits for them to use when they go into homes, because very often they're going into murder scenes, all kinds of tragic situations, and working with families. And so it's not about here we are with our gear and our equipment, and now we are going to get the bloodstains out of the floorboards. They really have to come in with a spirit of empathy and understanding that this is a highly traumatized home, and these people have been impacted with a horrific situation. So that was quite an honor to do that, and I fulfilled what that charge was, and there was no need to renew the contract. And then I sat back for a couple weeks only and thought, okay, what's next? And for whatever reason, this is how things have ended up rolling out in my life. I rarely have sought out employment. It seems to seek me. And some doors opened up for, at that time, the abuse and rape crisis shelter.
All right. And what was your official title for at the time the abuse of?
So I started out working as the director of prevention for the abuse and rape crisis shelter. So my role there, and then I called that the happy side. So you have the victim side and or intervention, and then the prevention side. So my role was to oversee a division that went into Warren County schools, all 8 districts, and provided education through the health curriculum requirements. And we taught about healthy relationships, how to identify healthy relationships. And that curriculum has developed throughout the years. We'll speak more to that in a few minutes. But that was a gist of my role there, was to provide supervision to that staff, and also oversee a program called Redo Day, which is a one-day interactive program for junior high and high school.
I did it.
Yay! Did you do it as a student or as a volunteer?
As a student.
Yay!
Yeah,
What school
Lebanon.
district? In Lebanon. Awesome.
Yep.
Was that a good experience?
I had a wonderful time. There was a lot of crying happening
Yeah,
that
a lot
day
of
across
crying.
the gymnasium.
Yeah.
But everyone absolutely loved it.
It's kind of one of those mountaintop experiences that impact your life forever. You kind of don't forget about it. But the main goal and purpose with Redo Day was to show that we have more in common than we do our differences, and to bring students together to create and build empathy with one another, and to understand every student walks through the school doors with a story. We really need to learn not to prejudge. Often referred to it as an anti-bullying program, but I kind of like to turn that, and that we're building character and empathy, and very effective for many years.
Absolutely. I very much remember it. That was a long time ago.
And Jacob, I did that for 2.5 years. And then left the agency. I don't think maybe before we rolled the tapes here, mentioned that, there was another gap year. Do you want me to tell you about that?
If you
If
like.
you would like to talk
It has nothing to do with the county and my service, but I did take a gap year, and I had an opportunity for a bucket list job. I loved interior design and staging, and I had a relative who was investing in a lot of homes and flipping homes, so I got to go in and spend a year kind of overseeing those projects and then staging them for resale, and I had a blast. I had so much fun. And that's when the board president of, again at that time, the Abuse and Rape Crisis Shelter reached out to me and wanted to have dinner. So, okay, now I'll let you segue into that.
My goodness.
I told you I have an eclectic resume.
It keeps it interesting. That's what you enjoy
Very.
about the prosecutor's office anyhow. So what was your official title coming back into?
Yeah. My official, and it stuck. It stuck for 8 years. It was executive director. So the executive director at that time, Janet Hoffman, had served for 27 years, and she retired. And so the board president at that time was Jack Colopy, and he was very sad to see me leave the agency the first time. Rumor has it, actually Janet shared with me that she was intending to announce her retirement when I came to her and said I was leaving the agency for that, what became just a 1-year thing, and I think she saw me as what could be the next leader, and when I left, it kind of altered her plans a little bit. I wish she had told me. But anyway, yes, I was pursued by the board and came on rather quickly under contract, and because they needed to give due diligence in actually posting the position and giving me some competition. I would have been crushed. But I very quickly, once I made them go through that process, which was the right thing for them to do, was hired as the permanent executive director of the Abuse and Crisis Shelter. Served in that capacity for 9 years. So overall, I was there 12 years.
What year? What time frame was that at that point? That was 2000 and...
I should have done my homework on this because this is what you do for a living. Time frames are so global to me. That would have been in 2015 when I came back as executive director. So, yeah.
Gotcha. And Safe and Main's always been on its location in Main Street?
So, absolutely not. That was a good trick question. No. So, it's been in a couple locations. They are in their 40th year. So, next year in 2004, they'll be celebrating a 40-year anniversary. I had the privilege of creating a lot of awareness and excitement around our 35th year. But they have been serving the community for 40 years, which speaks highly of the agency as a nonprofit. And remind me of your question. Oh, were they always located on Main Street?
Yeah.
No, they used to be on Northeast Street. Prior to that, they were further down the road. I forget what that street's called, but in a very small space. And we were at 27 Northeast Street, a darling, dilapidated historic house. It was really structurally kind of losing its charm. So one of the very first things that I did as executive director was collect a lot of money, not just to renovate that building, but to do an absolute complete, from the roof on down, renovation of the shelter, which was renovating the shelter definitely rises to one of, I think, the most exciting and feel good things that I was able to do for that agency. It's a lovely space. I'm so proud of it, and we've done a really good job of maintaining those renovations.
So once you switched to executive director, what did a day look like for you versus when you were there on the prevention side?
Everything looked different. So all of a sudden I went from being focused on one vertical, one department, one focus of the agency to being in charge of absolutely everything. One of the things that I've always tried to educate the community on about Safe on Main, which is what the new name is, I'm jumping ahead, aren't I? The Abuse and Crisis Shelter, is that we are one of two agencies within the state of Ohio that provides the full spectrum of services that are offered, and that would be both prevention and intervention services. And down the intervention realm is both domestic violence with 24/7, 365 shelter services, and as well as sexual assault, intimate partner violence services. So we are everything under one roof, When I went there are around 16 employees, some part-time, some full-time. When I left not that long ago, we were up to 25, 26 employees. The agency definitely doubled in not necessarily in the number of employees, but in the impact on the community, the quality of the services, and the educational levels of the staff we were hiring, and the ability to really provide operation processes and sustainable services and programming.
Absolutely. I know that I personally don't know that much about Safe on Main, and I assume that that's a pretty common thing that you hear. So what do you find that people don't understand about what Safe on Main does?
I appreciate you asking that question. I'm going to sidestep just a little bit because we keep interchanging the Abuse Rape Crisis Shelter to Safe on Main.
Yes, of course.
So if it's okay with you, I will let you know that about almost 3 years ago now, we went through a year-long strategic planning process. It was grueling yet very fun to change our name. When I was hired as the executive director, that was one of those goals that I wanted to achieve during my time of service, however long that may be. But I knew that that would take time, and the timing would have to be perfect, and it was. So we changed after all those years from the Abuse and Rape Crisis Shelter to Safe on Main. The word SAFE is capitalized and stands for Stopping Abuse for Everyone. Also, prior to changing the name, we changed locations. So we went from what, through renovations, became a very charming little historical office that we more than outgrew, to being able to purchase a 12,000 square foot building on Main Street. A lot of people said, well, what if you're not always on Main Street? And our support of the name that I don't know if defense is right, but is that every community has a Main Street. It's hard to go anywhere where there's not a Main Street. So it really doesn't matter what street we're on. We are an essential agency that is on a main street providing services to help those being abused and to help stop abuse. Okay, back to your question, which was?
What about these groups that you worked for is something that the public doesn't understand?
Sure. I think part of it is that we are more than a shelter, or as some people still use the term, battered women's home. And we really work hard on kind of changing that language and bringing it up to date a little bit. The other part is that we don't just serve women.
Yeah.
We serve men. We've had men in our shelter. It was a little daunting for some staff to say, well, blah, blah, blah. But we did, and there wasn't an issue with it. And I've had my own pushbacks on that over the years. But we predominantly are a shelter for women and children. And but we are that plus so much more. One of the things about entering into our shelter is it is a domestic violence shelter. So those there have experienced domestic violence and are still, even if the violence didn't occur within the last month or something, they're dealing with repercussions and adversities from the domestic violence. So we give them a safe space to be during that process of transition. I am so proud of the shelter and the programming and the goals and objectives of what I still say we do, but now they do, is beyond providing a safe home environment and food and protection. We have case managers. The number of survivors in that house setting are there because they are homeless as a result. They fled a violent situation. They have nowhere to go. They don't have family. A lot of times, here's a statistic, the majority of survivors of domestic violence leave up to 7 times before they leave permanently. So they are there because they literally have nowhere else to turn to. And one of our star achievements, and we're known for this at a state level, is getting our families into their own housing. And we do that within the agency through our own programming and working with the Ohio Domestic Violence Network. We also work with Warren County Metro as well. But we began taking on our own leadership to help achieve better outcomes. And we achieve 100% success. We will not ever ask somebody to leave until they have housing, as long as they are working toward that goal as well. Sometimes that's 30 days, 90 days, 60 days. We've actually had a family with us for about 1.5 years. Those were unusual circumstances. It was an immigrant. But we often get asked, how long's the stay? Are they kicked out after 30 days? Well, kicking out is not trauma-informed, and it is a trauma-informed agency, and we meet them right where they are. So everybody comes at a different place, a different space, and we discern where they are. You tell us what you need to move forward. We put them in control. We empower them. We point to the tools and the resources that can help them. And so they leave empowered. They leave with an enlarged amount of confidence that they didn't have before. They leave believing that they truly deserve to be in a healthy relationship. Their children deserve to be kept safe, that they can do it with the support of places like Safe on Main and community support. So we at Safe on Main have seen a very high success rate in the number because of our very strategic case management and assistance. We have seen a very high success rate in the number of women who don't fall back to their abuser.
Well, it sounds like obviously you guys are working with the public every day in a great amount, but stating that Safe on Main is one of only 2 institutions in Ohio capable of all of those amazing things, do you help individuals outside of Warren County as well?
We do. There are many other services. We're the only one in Warren County and ever have been. But there are, for example, Women Helping Women is very well known in this area, but they don't have shelter.
Right.
So the answer is absolutely. We get referrals all the time from agencies outside of our county. One of the programs that the Ohio Domestic Violence Network, which is a statewide organization that we work very closely with, provides is hotel. For example, if our shelter is full, we can apply for this program. And when I say apply, I mean instantly. and put a family into a hotel until space opens up within our 20-bed shelter. So other counties have that program available to them too. And it's best if they do it directly. An advantage of being within the county where your victimization took place is your access to those services. Also, if there are either civil or legal things going on through DR court, child enforcement agency, or even CPA or different things like that. If you're not within the county, it's really hard to access and be involved in those, and as well as some other community service provisions. So it can be very advantageous to be in a shelter and receive support within the county that you reside in, or where things are in process.
With the 20-bed shelter, how often is it that it is full?
100%.
Okay, I wondered about that.
It stays full all the time, and I say 20 beds, it's 5 bedrooms. Mm-hmm. They're all configured a little differently. We had a board member who built what looks like a Pottery Barn bunk room. It is the coolest thing. That room actually will sleep a family, if need be, up to 8. And we have a single room, we have a double room. We like to keep families together. Rarely do we desire to not give somebody their own private space. Periodically, if they've been with us a little while and we have a family that needs to come in or something, we'll ask them if they would mind, especially if we know they're at a point of almost transitioning out or something, and they usually don't. But we try to give everyone their own space. But yeah, the shelter stays full.
I know that is both sad and rewarding at the same time.
It is. We are glad that people are aware of our services and that they utilize them. It's very hard when you have to say we're full. Hotels, okay, it's not optimal. And it's hard to provide the same level of advocacy. You've got advocates who have to be 2 places at once, and just being in that safe home environment is healing in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what else do you find rewarding about your directorship?
The amount of funding that I've been able over my time there as executive director to bring in. I took on the charge of writing all the grants, and then was able to relinquish a huge one through the Ohio Department of Health over to who is now Megan Crouch, the Director of Prevention Services. But grant writing, seeking funds, getting that from private donors, corporate level. The county has been extremely supportive of Safe on Main. I mentioned the renovations needed. I went to the county and they were so gracious finding the right financial resources to match with our need. Fortunately, the countywide, the county itself, our Warren County Commissioners and elected officials, as well as municipalities and townships, recognize, it's taken a lot of work, but they recognize that Safe on Main is a service that we are providing to their community. There's no one else that's providing this services. It's essential, and we're the agency that does it, and I believe we're an agency that does it extremely well.
It sounds like you had to fight for that sort of position. Was there any other additional challenges that came with that?
Did you say I had to fight for that position?
Not for the position itself, but to get recognition from other parties.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know, a lot of work, and really it became one of the things Rachel Hetzel taught me was to, I always referred to her as a community-based prosecutor. And I became, and I think it comes naturally for me, but networking's something I enjoy, and it just kind of comes organically for me. But I considered myself a community-based executive director or leader. So I was always out in the community, always trying to make connections. And if you've ever been in sales, if you haven't, keep it that way. But if you ever have been, you learn quickly that people, you're selling yourself before you sell a product or a service. And so I spent a lot of time out within the community, doing a lot of speaking at civic organizations and different events. Stayed very connected, and I already was connected, but I just enlarged that a little bit. And obviously my platform became the mission of Save on Main.